Hello, everyone, especially those of you who are, more of a Final Fantasy XIV fan. I got some bizarre news from Game Rant about the mobile game. The title says, Final Fantasy XIV Mobile already has odd issues with the game's story. What could go wrong? What could go wrong? Okay, so let's take a little look in here. There's a bit of a warning. All right. The warning is the following post contains major spoilers for Final Fantasy XIV, Shadowbringers, and Endwalker. So if you have not played these particular story X packs, I recommend you back out of this video. That includes you, Emmy. You cannot listen to this. Just leave this video. Okay. With that warning out of the way, let's get started. So, following the full launch of Final Fantasy XIV Mobile in China, some players pointed out how a tower that should not appear for another few expansions has already turned up in one of the game's outdoor zones. What tower could that be? Can anyone guess? It's a certain black tower. Yeah. Now, although Final Fantasy XIV Mobile currently contains content from A Realm Reborn, the tower in question is part of a major plot point from the Shadowbringers and Endwalker expansions. So I think we can all know what these towers represents, but apparently one tower has shown up where it shouldn't have shown up. Now, there's this paragraph. The second paragraph kind of reiterates the most important information that we know about the mobile game. Final Fantasy XIV Mobile is the name. It's a collaborative effort between Square Enix and a company that is a subsidiary of Tencent. And this studio is called Lightspeed Studios. Now, Lightspeed is handling the main development. How much Square Enix is lending them help, there's a lot of question marks about that. But given that they are using basically one-to-one assets, I can only imagine that they must have sent over the assets, at least in some way, shape, or form, as well as the story. So I don't know how that's happening. I'd love to know how that's happening. I wish I could know how that's happening. It's so fascinating. So Final Fantasy XIV Mobile released fully on June 19th. So it's been out for a little bit. And we don't really know when it will come to the West. But what we do know is that Final Fantasy XIV Mobile apparently only includes the main story from A Realm Reborn, and there's only 5 playable races, and there's only some combat jobs available. So basically, they're keeping it really simple. The initial rollout is really, really simple. And that kind of makes sense. I imagine that they want to hold off on content and then slowly roll that out. Although the story is a retelling of A Realm Reborn, some keen-eyed players noticed a glaring inconsistency. While they were exploring Final Fantasy XIV's mobile's world map, so someone went to a subreddit, and they were called Long Jumping /B/7433. So this Reddit user shared a screenshot that showed a tower in the middle of Upper La Noscea known as the spoiler, Telophoroi Tower. The tower was located behind the ruins of the floating city of Nim, while some crystals serving as a point of reference. While the Telophoroi and their dark towers do appear in various parts of the world, the plot revolving around them does not start until the latter half of the Shadowbringers expansion into Endwalker as part of the Final Days story arc. So here's a picture. I'm going to click on it. Let's see if it will let me view it. I'll just open it in a new tab here. So we can see here we have this tower present. Now, I'm going to be honest. If I recall correctly, in that Shadowbringers content, that's what you would see. That's where it would be located in La Noscea. So the position isn't surprising. It's the timing that's surprising. Now, the next paragraph talks about more plot details, which I'm going to skip, and then makes the very obvious statement that towers should not appear in the game as of this writing. So what is going on? Now, the first, kind of doomer take would be that they're really changing up the story. But from the sounds of it, that's not the case. And this writer seems to point at a more believable reason why this is happening, okay? It says 2 other locations that had Telophoroi towers during the main story of Shadowbringers and Endwalker thankfully did not have this glitch, making the Upper Lanosha sighting an isolated incident. So the fact that they use the word glitch here kind of, for me, makes so much sense. I mean, obviously, this has got to be a glitch. In response, players called Lightspeed Studios' quality control with Final Fantasy XIV Mobile into question, while others found the discovery funny despite the story's inconsistencies. Between the Telophoroi's tower's appearance and the double-edged nature of Final Fantasy XIV Mobile's monetization model, the game has become a contentious topic with players. Now, I'm not going to go into the monetization and all that. I think I've touched on it pretty fairly well. We know it's going to be monetized to heck and back. I think the real question here is anything funny going to happen with the story? My guess, given how Square Enix feels very tied to Square Enix's flagship titles, right? So anything related to any of the flagship title games, they tend to be quite careful with, as far as I can tell. We do know that some recent remakes have tweaked the stories sometimes, usually with the original creator's blessing or under their direct control. So I could see Final Fantasy XIV maybe changing a bit of its questing systems. Like if they came out and said, hey, we're cutting some of these quests that we still think are a little bit bloated, I would be like, yeah, sounds about right. However, it does seem to me anyway, that we haven't heard any massive news about like major changes. Like Minfilia hasn't, transformed her gender into a male, for example. We haven't had any character seemingly so far not showing up where they should show up. So my guess is, my guess is that this is just a glitch. This is a bug. And, at some point they're going to patch it out. How fast will they patch it out? That is the question I think we can all kind of start thinking about, like, I wonder how that's going to go. And honestly, at this point in time, I think there is a sense, at least for me anyway, that some people might feel very suspicious and very cautious. And I think that's a very, very fair stance to take. We are all feeling rather suspicious right now about Square Enix for a variety of reasons. They just seem to be really slow with making necessary changes to the game. And if Lightspeed Studio doesn't kind of patch this out really quickly, it might feel like Lightspeed Studio is following this similar trend of just taking things at their own pace. And while I don't want to ever support crunch culture or brutalizing developers in an unnecessary kind of way, it does make you think about quality control. It makes you think about what's going on behind the scenes. Why isn't stuff being locked down? And this seems like a fairly, big glitch to pop up. That being said, I will say, as someone who has started studying how to program video games in Unity, I'm a little baby developer. I'm not even a developer. Don't even call me that. I'm the amoeba of programming. Even I can say, like, at this early stage, I can see how things can just go wrong. Like one little piece of code or one little box is not checked off properly and weird shit can happen. So I'm fairly lenient about these kinds of things, but at the same time, I'm very curious to see how quickly Final Fantasy XIV mobile's devs are going to respond and pivot to deal with any of these issues. And I'm very, very fascinated in seeing whether they are going to be able to respond to requested changes with ease. We already know that CBU 3, or Creative Studios 3, has struggled historically to respond super quickly to player concerns about various things, like, for example, the hats for Hrothgar's and Viera. So, that's been a bone of contention, shall we say, for a lot of players. And so I can see how many people would feel extremely frustrated when they feel like they've given feedback and that feedback isn't being executed on straight away. Now, I recognize that things might be quite convoluted behind the scenes. Maybe there's things that we can only guess at that is causing a slowdown of some sort. But I just wish that there could be some transparency about how that's happening, or why that's happening, or why it isn't happening. Now, I do think in some cases Yoshi P has before come out and explained in detail why there are certain issues with certain things. And I faintly recall him explaining that they may have gone a certain route with forming the models for certain races, and that may have caused issues with accommodating certain accessories and things. And I can be sympathetic, cognitively, empathetic to their position. But another part of me as a consumer is kind of thinking, well, maybe you should have foreseen that already. So the same thing, can apply to Lightspeed Studio. They may be fairly new on the scene. They might be fairly new to us. And so they will have to earn our trust. And I'm very fascinated in this story because I think it's a bit funny, but I also think it is a serious example of what we might expect going forward. So I'm looking forward to this game, as I've stated multiple times before. I don't want to be a complete doomer, but at the same point in time, I'm very, very interested in these kinds of stories because I think it will point forward to a certain kind of future that we can expect. And it makes me wonder how things will roll out over time, especially as it hits the West. Anyway, let me know what you think about this news. Do you have any other concerns about Final Fantasy XIV's mobile game? Share your ideas and thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you all next time. Take care. Peace.